Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is Wafa Rahman Wafa, PhD student at Faculty Forestry and Environment, University Putra, Malaysia, under the supervision of Dr. Amir Hamza Sharai. First of all, thank you, Dr. Amir Hamza Sharai, for his effort that provide kind opportunity for me to present the probability sampling lecture in this session. And thanks to all of you for your participation. Hope I will be able to share my knowledge and to exchange my knowledge with you in this session. Maybe it will be fruitful for your future studies. In this session, I will cover introduction, and I will explain a little bit about the sampling, type of the sampling. In the type of sampling, we will focus on non-probability sampling and probability sampling. And here I will explain a little bit the non-probability sampling and focus on probability sampling. And we will discuss on probability sampling elaborately, and we will talk about random sampling, systematic sampling, stratified sampling, cluster sampling, and multi-stage sampling. As you know, it will be too difficult for a researcher to survey all the population. It will be too difficult to survey the all population and get information for each of the individual from the population. So that's why it is needed to make a representative from the target population, and we will get information from representative individual. That will be the sampling. It should be an individual from the people, that should be an object, that should be another thing, for example, text, for example, videos, media. So we will select a representative from the population, and that's called the sampling. It will be too difficult for large fraction of the quantitative information to receive about the economy, environment, community, the regular, and also about the other aspect of life, of environment to survey. So that's why we will do sampling. Some of the information will be provided from the statistical agencies and from the government and non-governmental organization and their reports. They are estimating about the employment rate, poverty, environmental degradation, production, median family income. It will be provided from some statistic information from some statistic organizations. And some statistic may come from the consensus, but the majority are based on the sample of the relevant population. So the researcher is mostly they are conducting the survey and they collect information from the relevant population. As we discuss about the sampling is a process that we choose, that we select a number of individual or element for a study such a way that the individual represent the population, the whole population or group of the population from which the sample were selected. The sampling is the process of drawing a number of individual cases from a larger population, and we collect the information through sampling. And also sampling a way to learn about a large population by obtaining information from a subset of larger population, and we collect an individual as a sample and we collect information. For example, parliament poll are based on upon samples of the population that may vote in election, and they represent their representative, they select their representative in the parliament. So that's why that parliamentarian representing their population, and they discuss about the regulation in each other issues. So sampling is same like this procedure. Why we sampling? It's too important for a researcher to collect information. Without information, without survey, we cannot to analyze the data, analyze the information, and we cannot understand the population characteristic. That's why we are sampling to learn something about the whole population without having to study every member of the group. There is no need to discuss with each of the member of all population. So this is census, it's not this sampling. So for research we are doing sampling, we just choosing some member from the group and we discuss about the information instead of the all population. If we survey all population, it will be time consuming and it will be very costly. So that's why we are sampling to use less time and use less financial resources, and it will be cheaper. Studying every single instance of a thing is important or too expensive. But if we study every member, so it will be too expensive. So that's why we are sampling to reduce the cost and to avoid the time consuming. And we want to minimize the number of things that we examine or maximize the quality of our examination of those things we do examine. And lastly, we are doing sampling to improve data quality, obtain in-depth information about each subject rather than superficial data on all. So that's why we are doing sampling and we are choosing appropriate method to collect information and to choose the samples to collect the information about the whole, from the samples about the whole population that will represent. What can be sampled? We can sample instead of all population the people as individual. Maybe we can based on our own research context, we can to choose a group or collective of people instead of a large population, and we will sample it. And we can to sample the organizations, institutions, in some organization that we need to collect the information, so we are samplings. And also based on our research we sample some text. Here is available millions and thousands of text, and we are choosing appropriate text and we do sampling and collect the samples and collect the information from them. And also we are sampling the settings in environment, what is in the environment, in the particle of environments, in the element of environment we are choosing, and we do our sample. Also we sample object, artifacts, media products, and also we can do sample events and happenings. We can to collect some happenings or some events as a sample and we analyze. Here is some technical terms. The first of all, we will discuss about the characteristic of the population. Each of the population have some characteristics. Here is homogeneous. The population is homogeneous. If we explain all cases are similar, for example, the bottle of water producing in the factory, the all is similar. The bottle of beer, the bottle of water, and these all are similar, and they have homogeneous characteristic. And the other is stratified. They contain strata or layer. They are in the different layer and different rank. So the people with different level, different income, low income, medium income, high income, and also bachelor level, master level, and PhD level. These are the example of the stratified. And proportional stratified contains strata of known proportions, that the percentage of different nationalities of the students in university are the different percentage of the different minorities, different ethnics in the polling station in election that we are collecting information for. The other characteristic, the population mostly based on the group by type, constrained distinctive groups of department, buildings, towers, slabs, villas, tenant blocks, houses, institutions, organizations that we came to collect information. And the other characteristics group by location, different group according to where they are. We are discuss about geographic location, where they are living, where they are existing, in which environment they are related, in which location they are related. For example, we can use the name of the animals in different habitats: desert, equatorial forest, savanna, tundra. These are the example of grouped by location, the population characteristics. Uh, the sample frame, now we are talking about the target population. It is critical to the success of the research project to clearly define the target population. For each of the researcher, the research, it is very important to they define their target population, from which population they will do sample for their research based on the objectives. So it is very important and crucial that the researcher must define the target population for his research. Rely on logic and judgment. The target population must be logically assigned, and this will be some justification will be available. The population should be defined in connection with the objective of the study, with the scope of the study, and they all will be based on the problem statement of the study. So, based on our objective, we must collect information from the target population. We must define the target population based on our objectives. Target population, again, this is an example how to choose a target population from the whole population. From here, we are collecting the sample that is our target population. Here is some other technical words. An element is an object on which a measurement is taken. From this is the element definition. Which object that we want to take a measurement is called the element. Population is a collection of elements about which we wish to make an inference. So the element is the representation. The element represent the population. So that's why the population is a collection of elements and objects and people. It should be people, it should be object that we collect information and we do sample. And the sampling unit are non-overlapping collection of elements from the population that cover the entire population. As the sample frame, actually in the easy word, the sample frame is a list of the units of the target population is the sampling frame. The sampling frame consists of previously available description of the objects or material related to the objects in the form of maps, lists, directories, etc., from which sampling units may be specified in a sort of set of sampling units that can be selected. The frame may or may not be contain information about the size or other supplementary information about the units. It should, however, provide enough detail such that a unit, if included in the sample, may be located and taken up for inquiry in research that we are using. This is an example. That is the whole population. In the whole population, we are making the frame of our research sampling frame. From the sampling frame, we are collecting the samples. So this is called the sampling frame. Now we reach to discuss about the type of the sampling. Mostly here is two type of sampling. Two main type of sampling method are well known. First, probability sampling, and second is non-probability sampling. Where the sample unit from the in the probability sampling, where the sample units are selected from the population by a random procedure. And the second type, the non-probability sampling, in the non-probability sampling, where the sample units are selected from the population by non-random procedure, but the researcher have the open hand to choose the sample and select sample for the population from the population. Here is non-probability sampling have four types: convenience sampling and judgmental or purposive sampling, snowball sampling, and quota sampling. These are the four techniques that we came to do or conduct the probability sampling. Non-probability sampling. And for the probability sampling, here is 5 techniques that we are used the probability sampling: simple random sampling, systematic sampling, stratified sampling, cluster sampling, and multi-stage sampling, that we are conducting the samples in the probability in the random way. We are choosing our sample. Now we are talking mostly about the non-probabilities sampling, where the sample units are selected from the population by non-random procedure that we mentioned before. It will be chosen by the researcher, and here is some techniques that we named: convince, judgmental or purposive, snowball, and quota sampling. Non-probability sampling actually relies on the subjective judgment of the researcher, and in this sampling techniques, the chance do not have to be equal for a method to be considered probability sampling. But for example, one person could have a 10% chance of being selected, and another person could have a 50% chance, or 60% chance, or more than or less than to be selected in a sampling procedure. It's non-probability sampling when can't calculate the chance at all. So in the non-probability sampling, we cannot calculate the chances. In the probability sampling, everything is specified and we collect the information. Here is now this is the convenience sampling. In the convenience sampling, this is a type of non-probability sampling in which people are sampled simply because they are a convenient source of data for researchers. In probability sampling, each element in the population has known non-zero chance of being selected through the use of a random selection procedure. Non-probability sampling does not involve known non-zero probabilities of selection. So rather it's subject to methods are used to decide which element should be included in the sample or should not be included in the sample. So it's called the convenience sampling. So it's dependent on the researcher. The judgmental or purposive sampling. In this sampling, this is also a type of non-probability sampling technique. In this sampling, the researcher selects or chooses the units to be sampled based on their knowledge and professional judgment. They are judged and by the researchers' justification, they are choosing the sample. The process involved nothing but purposely handpicking individuals from the population based on the authority or the researcher's knowledge and judgment and their own justification. The other type of non-probability sampling is snowball sampling. Snowball sampling is where research participant recruit other participant from study for study. It is actually used where potential participants or respondents are tough to find. It's too difficult to find a potential participants, so it's called some snowball sampling in theory. Once you have the ball rolling, it collect and pick up more and huge amount of snow along the way to become larger and larger and larger. So the snowball sampling is a non-probability sampling method. It doesn't have the probability involved, which says simple random sampling where due chance are the same for any particular participant being chosen. Rather, the researcher used their own judgment to choose participant for their research. And the last technique of the non-probability sampling is the quota sampling. In the quota sampling, actually the quota sampling is a sampling methodology where data is collected from a homogeneous group. It involves a two-step procedure where two variables can be used to filter information from the large population. It can be easily to administered and helps in quick comparison. So that's why we are collecting the information in sample by quota. We give a specific quota for the specific groups and we collect the sample from them. Actually, quota sampling is a simple yet effective way to do research in the initial phases. From the population, the researcher could select two variables to study about a particular group. He could use gender, he could use the high education level for their purpose research. The researcher could also add other subpoints to the data set according to the requirement of the research and the study. So they are choosing the sample from the specific population. Now we are talking about the probability sampling, and we are focusing more in this session in probability sampling. So here we will discuss about the probability sampling. It is a sampling technique in which sample from a larger population are chosen using a method based on the theory of probability. So this probability sampling is come from the theory of probability. The probability theory, actually this is a branch of the mathematics considered with the analysis of random phenomena. Randomly we are choosing the sample. The outcome of a random event cannot be determined before it occurs. But it may be somebody or any one of the several possible outcomes. The actual outcome is considered to be determined by chance. And every individual have equal chance to be selected as a sample. Now the other aspect, probability sampling method select unit from the target population by random procedure. Everybody have equal chance to be selected. The most important requirement of the probability sampling is that every population has known and an equal chance that getting to be selected as a sample. The strength of probability sampling is generalization from the sample to population. Is based on sound statistical theory that we mentioned before, the probability theory. Whereas generalization from a non-probability sample to the population has to be based on the argument. In the non-probability, we do argument. Based on our argument, we select the sample. In the probability sample, they have the chance and we collect the information. We discuss about the probability theory, that the probability sampling is based on that theory. Okay, now there is some type of probability sampling. The one is simple random sampling, the second is systematic sampling, and the third one is stratified sampling, and the fourth one is cluster sampling, and the last one that we are choosing, it will be multi-stage sampling. So we will discuss each of them elaborately. A simple random sampling defined as a sampling technique where every atom in the population has an even chance and likelihood of being selected and the sample. Here the selection of atom entirely depend of chance and luck or probability. And therefore the sample technique is also sometimes known as a method of chances. As the name suggests, is completely random method that choosing the sample from the population. The sample is as easy as assigning number to the individual sample and then randomly choosing from those numbers through an outcome process that we are using the sampling. The simple random sampling technique, it is actually is simple random sampling is a fundamental sampling method and can easily be component of more complex sampling method. The main attribute of this sampling method is that every sample has the same probability of the chances in this sampling method. Okay, random mean that each person within the sample frame has an equal chance to be selected. In order to be random, a full list of everyone within a sample frame is required. When we are doing the sampling, so we required the full list of all target population to choose randomly sample for our research. So that's why the list of the respondent is very important, that we will select the sample for our chance. Actually, two approach aims to minimize any biases in this process of sample random sampling. The method of lottery, using the lottery method, is one of the oldest way and mechanical example of random sampling. And the method researcher given each member of the population a number. Each population have their own specific number, and the use of the number table similar to the one below this we mentioned in the screen help the sampling techniques. So in the use of the random number, we are choosing our sample and we collect the information from. The advantages of this sampling technique is lack of bias because individuals who make up the subset of larger population are chosen at random, and each individual in the whole population set has the some probability of being selected, and this create in the most cases in balanced subset that carries the greatest potential for representing their own population as a whole. So that's why there is in the random sampling technique, the base is chance. The base chance is less. Here is no base, lack of base. The other thing, simplicity. The advantages of simple random sampling is that it's very simple. As its name implies, producing a simple random sample is much less complicated than other methods. It is very specific, it is very simple and clear, such as stratified random sampling. As mentioned, an individual in the subset are selected randomly and there are no additional steps. Just we select randomly a sample from the list and we sample and we do our survey. Disadvantages. Difficulty assessing list of the full population, yes. And simple random sampling as an accurate statistical measure of large population can only be obtained when a full list of the entire population to be studied is available. In some instance, detail is on population of the student is too difficult to collect, and it will be difficult, and it will be maybe sometime it will be impossible in a university to collect the all employees, all group of employees, or student, or academies, or are employee in a company are accessible through the organization that connect each population. It will be difficult to collect the information and choose. And the other disadvantages of this simple random sampling is time consuming. In addition, it is time consuming when there is no full list of large population. So individual attempting to conduct simple random sampling must gather information from other list of large population. So the small, if publicly available, the smaller lists can be used to recreate a full list of the large population. But this strategy takes very huge amount of time and it will be timely. So that's why it is time consuming process also. And it's also costly. In addition, when the time takes to gather information from various sources, the process may cost a company or individual a substantial amount of capital. So it is a little bit also costly. And the other method is systematic sampling. It is when you choose every nth individual to be part of the sample. For example, you can choose every fifth person or 10th person to be in the sample. So systematic sample is an extended implementation of the same old probability technique in which each member of the group is selected at regular period to form a sample. There is an equal opportunity for every member of a population to be selected using this simple technique. For example, we are using the fifth person. Here is 100%. So in the 100% we will choose the 20%. When we want to choose the 20%, so from the 100% we are counting and we collecting each of the fifth person. So in the total it will be 20%. If we want to collect 10, it will be 20% from 200, and from 100 it will be just 10% and 10 sample that we will collect it. Actually, systematic sampling is a statistical method that researchers use to zero down on the desired population. They want to research a study. A researcher calculates the sampling interval by dividing the entire population size by the desired sample size. Systematic sampling actually is an extended implementation of probability sampling in which each member of the group selected as a regular period to from a sample. We defined systematic sampling as a probability method where the researcher chooses the elements from a target population by selecting a random starting point in select sample member after fixed sample interval. The interval is important here. In the fifth interval, each fifth sample individual will be collected. In the 10th, each of the 10th will be selected and we will choose. If a sample size of n is desired from a population containing n element, we made sample one element from for every nth element in the population. The whole population that I mentioned before, 200 or 100, the n is 100. The small n is the mentioned interval of the population that we will choose. We randomly sampling the first n per capital nth element from the population list. We then select every nth per nth capital nth element that follows the population list. For example, selecting every 10th list in a telephone book after the first random select the listing. So this is an example that we have a population of 200 individual. So we are choosing each of the 10. So each of the 10 we are collecting. So 200 per 20 is equal to 10. So divided the total number of element by the n by the number you want in your sample. For example, so this 200 we collect by 20. So there is be 10. We will collect the 10. Each of the 10 will be our sample. So we will collect the sample from the population. Advantages of this technique: easy to execute and understand. Systematic sample is relatively easy to construct, execute, compare, and understand. This is particularly important for studies or surveys that operate with tight budget constraint. So we can to choose the specific sampling, and we will choose a interval for the sampling, and we choose. And the other advantage of this sampling technique is control and sense of the process. A systematic method also provides researchers, the statisticians, with a degree of control and sense of process. This may be particularly beneficial for studies with strict parameter or a narrowly formed hypothesis that we are using this sampling technique, assuming the sampling is reasonably constructed to fit certain parameter. So that's why we are using this type of sampling techniques. Cluster selection eliminated. Cluster section, a phenomenon in which randomly chosen samples are uncommonly close together in a population, is eliminated in systematic sampling. Random sampling can only deal with this by increasing the number of samples or running more than one survey. This can be expensive alternative. But now the last advantage of the systematic sample is low risk factor. Perhaps the greatest strength of a systematic approach is it is low risk factor. The primary potential disadvantages of the system carry a distinctly low probability of contaminating the data. So that's why this is low risk factor based on the data quality. Disadvantages: assumed size of population can be determined. The systematic method assumes size of the population is available can be reasonably approximated. For instance, suppose researchers want to study the size of rates in a given area. If they don't have any idea how many rates there are, they cannot systematically select a starting point or interval size. So that's why assumed size of population can be determined. So it's sometimes difficult and we cannot do determine. A need for natural degree of randomness. A population need to exhibit a natural degree of randomness along the chosen metric. So if the population has a type of standardized pattern, the risk of accidentally choosing very common case is more apparent, and it will be a little bit difficult. So this is also the disadvantages of the systematic sampling. Now we reach to the stratified sampling. Stratified sampling, we can use the stratified sampling. It is involve a method where a larger population can be divided into smaller groups and smaller strata, levels, layers that usually don't overlap but represent the entire population together. In the whole population, here is a different layer and different strata that are representing the whole population. While sampling, this group can be organized and then draw a sample from each group separately. Classify by sex, age, ethnicity, and similar way. Sorry. Secondly, a probability sampling procedure that involves dividing the population group or strata defined by the presence of criterion characteristic and then random sampling from each stratum, from each layer, from each group of the people. So we are randomly selected. Third example, if of the example of this, if we had a population that was 10 women and you want a sample that also is 10% women. Fourth, they draw a stratified random sample, group the study population into strata or into group that share given characteristic. Enumerate each group separately, random sample within each strata. Stratified sampling example that we will give one example more. A researcher are performing study designed to evaluate the political living of a economic student at a major universities. The researcher want to ensure that random sample best approximate the student population, including gender, undergraduates, graduate students. The total population in the study is, for example, 1000 students. And from their subgroups are created as shown to 1000 population. So we are collecting the information from these 1000 population. Researchers would assign every economic student at the university to one of four subpopulation: male undergraduate, female undergraduate, male graduate, and female undergraduate, female undergraduate, and female graduate. Researchers will next count how many students from each subgroup made up the total population of 1000. So we will make 1000 population of student. From there, researchers calculate each subgroup's percentage representation of the population. Male undergraduates, for example, 450 students out of 100 is 45% of the population. Female undergraduate is included in our whole 1000 is 200 students. So in the 1000, it's make the 20% of the population. So male graduate student, 200 student is available in the university. So based on the 1000 population, from the 1000 population in percentage, it is 20% of the population. Female graduate student is 150. So here the student of the female graduate is percentage is 15% in the university. So random sampling of each subpopulation is done based on its representation within the population as whole. Since male undergraduates are 45% of the whole population, 45 male undergraduate are randomly chosen out of the subgroup, and because male graduate make up only 20% of the population, 20 are selected for the sample, and so on. This is the example of the stratified sampling that we used. Another example here you can see in the screen. A company, for example, have 800 full-time and 200 part-time employees. And to draw a sample of 100 employees, a simple random sample of 80 full-time employees is selected, and a simple random sample of 20 part-time employees is selected. So that's why, based on the strata, based on the percentage, based on their volume, we are choosing randomly the certain amount of the samples. This is a graphical example of the population. From the whole population, we make each layer, each strata. From the strata, we select a certain percent or number of the population. Advantages of this techniques accurately reflect population. It is accurately reflect the population. So, and the other type ensure a high degree of representativeness of all strata or layers in the population. Each group, each collective of the people in the whole population, they can represent, they give representativeness. So that's why it is advantages of this type of the population. Disadvantages of this population method is that number one is can't be used in all studies. It's too difficult to use in all studies. So that's why we cannot use this kind of sampling in all studies. And whenever we are using this technique, and where you want to choose all of the people, different layer we include, then we will must use this kind of sampling technique. The sorting process, a starter will be difficult. Yeah, it will be difficult to sort sort a starter. It will be difficult to make a layer, to make a different layer and different starter in our population. The other type of probability sampling is the cluster sampling. Sometimes the unit of population are cluster and group of units, and randomly sampling of clusters can be more convenient or less expensive than random sampling of individual units. For example, a student are clustered in schools, and random sampling of school is more convenient than random sampling of individual students. It is a way to randomly select participants when they are geographically separated out. For example, some groups living in the one area, the other is living in the one area, and from the different area we want to collect the information, and we collect the different we make the cluster in different geographic location, and that each cluster will be sampled. Cluster sampling using analysis of particle population in which the sample consists of more than a few elements, for example city, family, university, etc. The clusters are then selected by dividing the greater population into very similar sections. This type of method is generally used for community-based studies and very good to sample the minority groups. So that's why each of the group are selecting in this kind of sampling techniques. In this study, For example, we will select students from multiple schools. Thus, each school becomes one cluster. Each individual child in the school has much in common with their other children in the same school. Compared with children from other school, for example, they are more likely to have the same socioeconomic background. Thus, the children are recruited from the same cluster. If the researcher uses cluster sample, he, she or she must also perform cluster analysis. The statistical method for these are different compared with non-cluster analysis. The method was used commonly. We give another example. If you are conducting a study of Kajang High School student, you could obtain a list of high school students in the state and complete random sampling. A clustered sample would be more practical. Obtain a list of high school in Selangor, random sample in high school from the list, obtain list of students from each high school selected in, then contact each of these students. Then we collect the information. Here is, for example, this is the map of the Afghanistan, and we are geographically collecting information from the different provinces. Advantages of this sampling techniques requires favor resources. Since cluster sampling select only certain groups from the entire population, the method requires fewer resource for the sampling process. Therefore, it is generally cheaper relative to simple random or stratified sampling, as it requires fewer administrative and travel expenses. So it is fewer resources, more feasible. The division of the entire population into homogeneous group increase the feasibility of the sampling. Additionally, since each cluster represents the entire population, more subjects can be included in the study. So this is more feasible technique for sampling. The disadvantages is best it is best sample will occur. So this procedure of sampling consists, so it will be, the sample will be best, and high sampling error will be also experienced in this kind of selecting of the what we say procedure. So the sampling error will be also a little bit high. Here is stratified and cluster sampling. We compare the stratified and cluster sampling. The stratified sampling, the population divided into few groups, but in cluster, the population divided many groups. And each subgroup has many elements in the stratified sampling, but in the cluster sampling, each subgroup has few elements in it. So the stratified subgroups are selected according to some criterion that is related to the variables under study, but in the cluster we see subgroups are selected according to some criterion of ease of availability and data collection. So in the stratified, homogeneity within subgroups, but in cluster, heterogeneity within subgroups. In stratified, heterogeneity between subgroups, but in the cluster, homogeneity between subgroups. In the stratified sampling, choice of element for within each subgroup is available, but in the cluster, random choice of subgroups are available. Oh, now we are discussing in the last type of probability sampling, it is multi-stage sampling. It is a probability sampling procedure that involves several stages, such as randomly selecting cluster from a population, then randomly selecting element from each of the cluster. The procedure of sampling, which consists of first selecting the cluster and then randomly choosing a specific number of units from each selected cluster, is known as two-stage sampling. So it's called the multi-stage sampling procedure. Multi-stage divide the large population into stages to make the sample process more practical. A combination of this technique is a combination of stratified sampling or cluster sampling, and simple random sampling is usually used. Let's say you wanted to find out which subject in a country schools children prefer. So a population list of the all country of the all school children would be near impossible. It will be impossible to find or to collect, to come by. So you cannot take a sample of the population. Instead, you divide the population into state and take a simple random sample of state. For the next stage, you may take a simple random sample of schools from within those states. Finally, you could perform simple random sampling and on the student within school to get your sample. Actually, multi-stage sampling is applied manually to these areas. Apply to multi-stage design where the population is too vast, and researching every individual is impossible. And also to gather student perceptions from students belong to various schools studying different courses and located throughout the country, and also sometimes to survey employees of multinational companies belonging to multiple locations in multiple countries. Multi-stage sampling example, we randomly, for example, random digital dials, area codes randomly sampled, then we select 3 digital local exchange randomly sampled, then last 4 digital randomly sampled, then then asking the person who answered the phone for the appropriate person you want to interview. This is also one example can be used. The advantages of this sampling is cost effective and time effective. So the cost effective and time effective because this method helps cut down the population to smaller groups, and we choose the sample by different stages. Can divide population into groups without restriction. So it allow researcher to apply cluster or random sampling after determining the group. So that's why this is the advantages of this group. How to make cluster and sub cluster. So it is not need a complete list of the members of the target population, dramatically reducing sample preparation cost. So this is also cost effective, and also it's easy to make a subgroup in clusters, and we will collect our samples from the subgroup in clusters. The disadvantages is this method sample may not represent all population. So this is also one of the disadvantage of this method. And the second one, it is generally less accurate than other methods. Due to the fact that multi-stage sampling cuts out portion of the population from the study finding can never be 100% representative of the population because it's cut down the population. So even though the theory of multi-stage sampling is to focus on the within group variance and emphasize the between group variance, which could to be minimized, so there is no way to know if the demographics cut from the study could have provided any useful information to researchers. Data gets lost in the sense that everyone is counted, so that's why it is generally less accurate than other methods. There is I compared probability sampling and non-probability techniques as a conclusion. So here is probability sampling technique give the most reliable representation of the whole population. Probability sampling is the preferred method of sampling because the generalization of sample results is based on statistical theory, but is not often applied in behavioral research. Probability sample require an adequate definition of the target population and the construction of the correct sampling frame. The sampling frame is needed to select person randomly from the population. And the non-probability sampling, non-probability techniques relying on the judgment of the researcher or on accident cannot generally be used to make generalization about the whole population. Non-probability mostly used in the qualitative research and probability mostly used in the quantitative research. And so it's used for non-probability is used for the generalization to make the generalizations. So this is the resources for further reading. If you need to read more about these probability sampling and non-probability sampling. If you have any question, please comment. And thank you for attending and participating in the session. At the end, I once again thanks to Professor Dr. Amir Hamza Sharai, who is my supervisor, that he makes me and he supports me to lecture in this session in your class. Thank you so much for your patience and for your attending this session. Thank you very much.